Let's talk about what happens when a city's rage literally becomes a superpower. We're going to dive into one of the most catastrophic events in Dakota City, an event that didn't just create heroes and villains, it took all the city's hidden social problems and exploded them out into the open.
It really all comes down to this one simple but massive question. What actually happens when the pressure cooker of social inequality finally and literally blows up?
So, to really get the Big Bang, you have to think of it as a sociological catalyst. It's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. It's an event so huge that it takes all the stuff simmering under the surface, the power imbalances, the social divides, and makes them real, tangible things you can't ignore anymore. It forces everyone into a confrontation.
Okay, so how did we even get here? To understand the sheer impact of the Big Bang, we've got to look at the city that gave birth to it. A city that was already pushed right to the edge.
And the path to this disaster happened fast. It all kicks off with a massive gang turf war on Parris Island. The police response? Not de-escalation, but a huge citywide crackdown. And then they make the one decision that changes everything. They deploy an experimental tear gas, a gas that's secretly laced with something called quantum juice. And boom, the Big Bang, an event that kills a whole lot of people but changes the survivors forever. Now, that secret ingredient, quantum juice, is the absolute key. Because it didn't just give people random powers like flight or super strength. No, it was way more personal. It actually linked a survivor's new powers to their deepest psychological state. Just think about that for a second. If you felt invisible your whole life, maybe you gained the power to turn to shadow. If you were burning with rage, maybe you can now control fire. Your trauma, literally, becomes your weapon.
And this leads us to the first major fallout. In a way, the Big Bang became this brutal, violent equalizer. It just handed an incredible amount of power directly to the city's most forgotten communities.
This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? The Big Bang was a literal equalizer. It gave people the ability to fight back against systemic oppression with actual physical force. In one single moment, the entire power dynamic of Dakota City was flipped completely upside down. The survivors, they started being called bang babies, and for the first time ever, they could actually strike back at the police, at the corporations, at all the systems that held them down. But here's the thing. This new power was total chaos. There was no plan, no unified goal. So a lot of them just used their new gifts for personal gain or revenge. It was just raw, unfiltered anger finally given an outlet.
But the most important outcome of all of this, they were no longer just disposable statistics on a report. They couldn't be ignored. Dakota City was finally, and violently, forced to see the human beings it had been trying so hard to forget. So you can imagine the people already in power weren't too thrilled about this. Which brings us to the other side of the coin, the establishment's fear, and how the city's elite decided it was time to strike back.
Yeah, for the rich and powerful of Dakota, this wasn't an equalizer. It was the end of the world. The Big Bang was a massive wake-up call that showed them just how fragile their control over the city really was.
I mean, this slide lays it out perfectly. It was one event, but it created two totally different worlds. For the marginalized, it was sudden empowerment, a voice, a chance to finally fight back. For the elite, it was just chaos, a threat, a problem that needed to be contained.
So what did they do? They reacted with pure fear. It was just this desperate scramble to get control back. They started militarizing the police, pouring money into new tech to hunt down the bang babies. But all that did was pour gasoline on the fire, kicking off this horrible, escalating cycle of violence. But hold on, it wasn't just a simple two-sided war. A third group popped up out of all this chaos, community activists, who looked at the bang babies and saw something completely different. They saw kids who needed to be saved. Their whole perspective was a game changer. This quote here really nails it. They saw the bang babies not as threats, but as victims of a failed social experiment. They were able to look past the terrifying powers and see scared, vulnerable kids who desperately needed guidance. So their approach was constructive, not destructive. Step 1, see these kids as victims, not villains. Step 2, give them mentorship and real direction. Step 3, help them channel all that power into something positive, something for real social change. And maybe most importantly, Step 4, protect them from all the people who are going to try to exploit them. And trust me, exploitation was definitely on the menu. Which brings us to our fourth major group in this whole mess, the corporate world. They saw the Big Bang not as a tragedy, but as a gold rush. This is
Just a chilling way to look at things, but it's crucial. As this quote says, to the corporate world, the mutated citizens were not people but biological assets. Just let that sink in. Human beings now listed on a balance sheet as an asset.
You had companies like Alpha Technologies jumping in immediately, trying to figure out how to monetize or weaponize the survivors. From their cold, calculating point of view, a bang baby was one of two things: an asset you could control or a liability you had to eliminate. And this kicked off a whole new war, a battle for basic human rights against pure, unchecked corporate greed.
So when you put it all together, what do you get? Well, the Big Bang created a brand new reality for Dakota. The entire city became this living, breathing, and incredibly dangerous laboratory for social conflict.
Here's the first major takeaway. The invisible became visible. Every hidden tension, every social crack that the city had tried to pave over was suddenly ripped open for everyone to see, and it often had superpowers.
And because of that, any illusion of civility was just gone. It was completely stripped away. The city's polite mask fell off, and all that was left was raw, open conflict.
And that leads us to the biggest change of all. In this new Dakota, justice wasn't something you debated in a courtroom anymore. Nope, it was a physical, daily battle for your own survival, fought right there on the streets.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty heavy question to chew on. When the people with no power suddenly get all the power, who gets to decide what justice actually looks like?